My name is Sarah, and I was 26 when this happened, working as a property manager for a self-storage facility just outside of Portland. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid decent and was usually pretty straightforward. Most days I just sit in the office, check people in and out, and occasionally deal with someone who forgot their access code. The facility was pretty big, about 200 units spread across 3 buildings. We had the standard setup: climate-controlled units inside the buildings and regular units on the ground floor. The place was open 24/7 with keycard access, but my shifts were typically 3 p.m. to 11 p.m., which meant I was often the only employee there as it got dark. I'd been working there for about 4 months when I started noticing something weird about Unit 147. It was in Building B, one of the indoor climate-controlled units on the second floor. The unit had been rented by a guy named Michael Chen for almost 2 years, and according to our records, he always paid on time via automatic bank transfer. The weird part was that our keycard system showed he hadn't actually accessed his unit in over 6 months. That's not entirely unusual. Some people rent storage and basically forget about it. But what made it strange was that about 3 weeks before all of this happened, someone started accessing that unit multiple times a week, sometimes during the day, but mostly late at night between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. I probably wouldn't have noticed at all, except that my manager asked me to pull a report of all units that hadn't been accessed in over 90 days. We were supposed to send reminder emails to those customers. Unit 147 came up on the list, but when I checked the recent logs, I saw all these late-night entries. I mentioned it to my manager, thinking maybe Mr. Chen had just gotten back from a long trip or something. My manager said he'd look into it, but I could tell he didn't really care. It wasn't causing problems, so why worry about it? But I couldn't shake this uncomfortable feeling. The frequency of the visits was just odd. Some nights the card would scan in at like 11:47 p.m., then scan out at 11:52 p.m., just 5 minutes. Other times it would be hours. One night the card scanned in at 1:23 a.m. and didn't scan out until 5:48 a.m. What was someone doing in a storage unit for over 4 hours in the middle of the night? I tried to tell myself it was none of my business. People have their reasons. Maybe he worked night shifts and that was the only time he could organize his stuff. Maybe he was going through a divorce and needed a quiet place to sort through belongings. Maybe he just had insomnia and reorganizing helped him relax. But then one night, about a week after I first noticed the pattern, I was doing my closing rounds through Building B. It was around 10:30 p.m., and I was just walking through to make sure all the hallway lights were working and nobody had left their unit door open. As I walked past Unit 147, I heard something. It was muffled, but it sounded like a voice, or maybe crying. I stopped and pressed my ear against the door. The units are pretty well insulated, so you usually can't hear anything from inside them, but I definitely heard something. It was rhythmic, like someone talking or maybe watching a video. I knocked on the door. "Hello? Everything okay in there?" The sound stopped immediately. I waited, feeling stupid standing there in the hallway. After about 30 seconds of silence, I knocked again. "This is facility management, just checking in." Nothing. I pulled out my phone and checked the access log. Sure enough, the card had scanned in at 10:04 p.m., but hadn't scanned out yet. Someone was definitely in there.
My heart was beating faster now, though I wasn't sure why. Technically, there was nothing wrong with someone being in their unit. That's what they rented it for. But something about the sudden silence after I knocked felt wrong. I walked away, finishing my rounds, but I couldn't focus. When I got back to the office, I pulled up the security camera footage. We had cameras at all the entry points and in the hallways, though not pointing directly at unit doors for privacy reasons. I scrolled back to 10:04 p.m. and watched the hallway camera for Building B, second floor. At exactly 10:04, I saw someone walk into frame and stop at Unit 147. But here's what made my stomach drop. It wasn't a man. It was a woman, probably in her 30s, with long dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing jeans and a black jacket. She stood in front of Unit 147 for a moment, looking up and down the hallway, before scanning her key card and entering the unit. I sat back in my chair, confused. The account was registered to Michael Chen. I pulled up his file and looked at the ID he'd submitted when he first rented. It was definitely a man, probably in his 50s with short graying hair. Maybe it was his wife or girlfriend. That would make sense. Customers could request additional keycards for family members. I checked the account notes. Only one keycard had ever been issued for Unit 147. So this woman was using Michael Chen's keycard. Again, not necessarily a problem. Maybe he lent it to her. Maybe they were married and she needed to grab something. But combined with everything else, the months of no activity followed by these frequent late-night visits, the strange sounds, the sudden silence when I knocked, it all felt off. I kept watching the camera feed, waiting to see when she'd leave. 10:30 p.m. passed. That's when I had walked by and heard the sounds. I watched myself on camera walk up to the unit, knock, wait, then walk away. 11 p.m. came and went, then 11:30. My shift was almost over. At 11:47 p.m., I saw movement on the camera. The woman emerged from Unit 147, but she wasn't alone. She was dragging something behind her. It looked like a large duffel bag or maybe a rolled-up carpet. Whatever it was heavy. She struggled with it, pulling it a few feet, stopping to catch her breath, then pulling again. I watched, frozen, as she dragged it all the way to the stairwell and out of frame. I immediately switched to the ground floor camera. A few minutes later, I saw her emerge from the stairwell still dragging the bag. She pulled it all the way to the exit, then out to the parking lot. The parking lot camera was pretty grainy, but I could see her load whatever it was into the back of a dark SUV. Then she drove away. I sat there staring at the screen, my mouth dry. What the hell did I just watch? I tried calling my manager, but it went straight to voicemail. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? A customer removed something heavy from their storage unit? That's literally what storage units are for. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I pulled up Michael Chen's contact information. There was a phone number and an email address. I decided to send a quick email just to verify that he knew someone was accessing his unit. Hi, Mr. Chen. This is Sarah from Pacific Storage Solutions. I wanted to reach out regarding your unit, 147, in Building B. We've noticed some recent activity on the account and wanted to confirm that you authorized additional users to access the unit. If you could give us a call at your earliest convenience, we'd appreciate it. Thanks. I sent it off, then locked up the office and went home. But I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that woman dragging that heavy bag, the way she kept looking around like she was checking if anyone was watching. The next morning, I got a response to my email. But it wasn't from Michael Chen. It was from his sister. Hello, I'm Linda Chen, Michael's sister. I'm not sure who authorized anyone to access my brother's storage unit, but it shouldn't be possible. Michael passed away 7 months ago from a heart attack. I've been meaning to clear out his unit, but haven't had the chance yet. His account should have been frozen. If someone is accessing it, they're doing so without permission. Please call me immediately. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I immediately called Linda Chen. She picked up on the second ring. Hello?
Hi, Miss Chin. This is Sarah from Pacific Storage. I just got your email. I'm so sorry for your loss. I had no idea that Mr. Chin had passed away. Thank you, she said, her voice tight. Can you tell me what's going on? You said someone's been accessing his unit. I explained everything. The access logs, the woman I saw on camera, the bag she dragged out. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Miss Chen? That's impossible. Michael's keycard was in his wallet when he died. I have all of his belongings. No one should have access to that unit. My blood ran cold. Are you absolutely sure? Positive. I was the one who collected his things from the hospital. His wallet, his keys, everything. It's all in a box at my house. Could someone have made a copy of the card before he died? I don't know. Maybe. But who? Neither of us had an answer. Linda said she'd drive down to the facility that afternoon. In the meantime, I pulled up every piece of footage I could find from the past 3 weeks. The woman had accessed Unit 147 17 times, always late at night. And the last 3 visits, she dragged something out, 3 different heavy bags.
When Linda arrived, she looked exhausted and worried. I showed her the footage. When the woman's face came into frame, Linda grabbed my arm. "Oh my God. Do you know her?" "That's Rebecca, Michael's ex-girlfriend." Linda explained that Michael and Rebecca had dated for about a year, but he'd broken up with her 5 months before he died. According to Linda, Rebecca hadn't taken it well. She'd shown up at Michael's apartment multiple times, called him constantly, even showed up at his work. Michael had been considering getting a restraining order, but died before he could. After Michael passed, she showed up at the funeral, Linda said, her voice shaking. She was acting like she was his widow, trying to sit with the family. We had to ask her to leave. I haven't heard from her since. "How would she have gotten his key card?" I asked. Linda thought for a moment. "She still had a key to his apartment. When I went to clear out his place a few months ago, I noticed some things were missing. Some of his clothes, a few personal items. I thought maybe I was just forgetting what he had. But now, she broke into his apartment and took the key card." Linda nodded slowly. "But what is she doing in that storage unit? And what was she removing?" I looked at the footage again, at those heavy bags. A terrible thought was forming in my mind. "Miss Chen, did your brother keep anything particularly valuable in that unit? Anything someone might want to steal?" "I don't think so. It was mostly just old furniture from when he downsized his apartment. Some boxes of books, holiday decorations, nothing worth much." "We need to open the unit." Linda agreed. I grabbed the master key and we headed to Building B. As we walked down the second-floor hallway toward Unit 147, I felt a sense of dread building in my chest. I unlocked the unit and pulled up the rolling door. The smell hit us immediately. It was a sickly, sweet chemical smell mixed with something rotten. Linda gagged and stepped back. I pulled my shirt up over my nose and mouth and looked inside. The unit was maybe 10 by 10 feet. Most of it was empty now, just some scattered boxes in the corner. But against the far wall, there were dozens of pictures. They were taped up, covering almost the entire wall. All pictures of Michael. Some looked like they were taken when he was alive, normal photos that might have been from his social media. But others looked like they'd been taken without him knowing. Michael at the grocery store, Michael getting into his car, Michael through his apartment window. And in the center of the wall, there was a single picture of Michael in a hospital bed. He looked pale and thin, clearly very ill. Someone had drawn a heart around his face in red marker. "Oh my God," Linda whispered from behind me. But that wasn't the worst part. On the floor beneath the pictures, there were trash bags. They were torn open, and inside I could see clothes. Men's clothes, covered in that same chemical smell. The clothes looked stiff and stained. "We need to call the police, right now." Linda was already pulling out her phone.
The police came within 20 minutes. They sealed off the entire building and spent hours processing the unit. I gave them copies of all the security footage and access logs. According to the detective who interviewed me later, Rebecca had been living in that storage unit on and off for months. The clothes in the bags had been soaked in formaldehyde. She'd been preserving Michael's clothes, things she'd taken from his apartment. The heavy bags I'd seen her remove contained the bedding she'd been using and other personal items. She'd been systematically clearing out evidence as she noticed the unit was getting attention. They found her 2 days later at a motel about 40 miles away. In her car, they found one of the bags I'd seen her drag out. Inside were more of Michael's belongings, his jacket, his shoes, even his toothbrush. She'd created a kind of shrine to him, and after he died, she'd been living with these items, sleeping surrounded by his clothes in that storage unit. The detective told me that Rebecca claimed she and Michael were soulmates, that they were meant to be together forever. She couldn't accept that he'd left her, and after he died, she felt like being in that unit surrounded by his things was the closest she could get to him. The most disturbing part? According to her confession,
She'd been planning to move his body to the storage unit. She'd researched how to access the morgue, how to preserve remains. The only reason she hadn't gone through with it was because she couldn't figure out the logistics of getting him from the cemetery without being caught. I quit that job 2 weeks later. I couldn't walk through Building B anymore without thinking about her and that unit, surrounded by stolen clothes and pictures, talking to them like Michael was still there. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about that sound I heard when I knocked on the door. That muffled voice that stopped as soon as she knew someone was listening. And I wonder, was she talking to herself? Or in her mind, was she talking to him?